Hello, and welcome to OPA GCSE Sociology, and we're going to be looking at today, how do sociologists explain the difference in criminal behaviour and different age groups? So just for the do now very quickly, I want you to answer those 5 questions. So what is the difference between crime and deviance? How do we measure crime? What are the issues with this? What is meant by crime being a social construct? Give an example. What is strain theory? And finally, what is the Marxist explanation of crime? Remember, there's 2 elements to that. As a stretch and challenge, what is the psychological and biological explanation of crime? So I'm just going to pause it very quickly. If you do the same, just give it 5 or 10 minutes, answer your questions, and then we'll go over that. Right, so for number 1, crimes are, and this is the very simplistic definition of it, crimes are acts against the law. Deviancy is actions against society's norms and values. So one is formal, one is informal. So an example of that, speeding is against the law. Picking your nose is deviant. One's clearly illegal, one's just socially frowned upon. So for number 2, the way in which we get our data on crime. So we do that through official crime stats, and then that can often be informed with self-report studies and victim surveys. So for number 3, the question was, what is meant by the social construction of crime? So it's when the idea of what is criminal or deviant is shaped by wider society. So it's often dependent on things like time, place, context, culture. And then for number 4, when we're talking about the functionalist explanations or what strain theory is specifically. So Robert Merton, yeah, he's a functionalist. He describes this situation where there's individuals who aspire to society's values. So things like success, meritocracy, financial gain and whatnot. But don't have the means to achieve it. So they might get a poor education, they haven't got a good family support network, things like that. And they often resort to criminality as an alternative means to gain this form of status. And that might be through rebellion, that might be through committing crimes to gain money, all sorts of things. And then the Marxist one, that's kind of split into 2 bits. So the first bit is this idea that society and the capitalist system concentrates on blue-collar crimes over white-collar crimes. So remember those crimes associated with the poor as opposed to the rich, even though they're less damaging to society. And equally, they believe that many resort to criminality due to relative deprivation. Right, so for task 1, I want you just to write down what age group in society is most likely to commit crime, and why do you think this is? Okay, and if you can, as a stretch and challenge, what sort of crimes is that specific age group? What sort of crimes are associated with that age group? Right, so the Youth Justice Statistics 2015 shows that the peak age of offending in England and Wales is 17. And they believe there's 2 reasons for that. 1, more young people live in urban areas where there is more opportunity for crime, but also that young people are more likely to feel pressure by society, their peers, the media, whoever it is, to own must-have items or to have a status. Youth Justice Statistics 2015, after 25, there is a steep drop-off in criminality as roles change. So as people start to become parents or wage earners or whatever it may be. So from what the youth justice statistic are saying, that kind of links in a little bit with Merton's strain theory, about these pressures to subscribe to society's values, but also you could argue it's a bit Marxist by the idea that we're told to buy things, must-have items. And you can see there just above a stat there on youth crime. And for the stretch and challenge, these are the most commonly recorded crimes for young offenders. So you can see violence against a person, theft, criminal damage, sort of are the top ones there. Right, so for task 2, what I want you to do, I just want you to summarize what the different theories say about crime and age, what their different explanations are for why maybe young people are more likely to commit crime or at least appear on criminal statistics. Right, so the first one we got is the functionalist. So we got Albert Cohen again with status frustration, and you'll notice there's a crossover. We're trying to work smart here in terms of not doing too many theories where we can. So we've done it before, but just for the sake of it, we'll go over it one more time. So status frustration is when young, predominantly working class men who mainly experience a status frustration, they are unable to achieve the values of success encouraged in society by conventional means. So they're not able to do well at school. They're not able to get promotions or even get a job in the first place. These youths therefore resort to alternative means to gain their status in subcultures that often adapt deviant or criminal behavior. So they might resort to things like underage drinking or vandalism to gain a status. And this is in response to the status frustration. So they get that status within their subcultures. So the second functionalist we need to know, it's not Merton this time, it's Miller with focal concerns. And Miller sees working class youths delinquent behavior as normal and as part of macho lower class culture, which they are socialized into. So this culture can lead to criminality displaying characteristics such as toughness and masculinity, street smart, excitement or thrill seeking, fatalism, so making the best of poor situations, or an acceptance of violence. So lots of traits there that essentially these working class youths are looking for or need to compete to gain that status. So this occurs most in youths as these characteristics are often exaggerated in early years. So they're more likely to be extremely accepting of violence. They might be going overboard at displaying that street smart and toughness. And they might have to prove it through violent means. So, for example, it's normalized to deal with disputes by fighting instead of discussion. So Miller's saying this focal concern amongst young working class people encourages them to resort to things, characteristics that will get them in a spot of bother and will get them more likely to get arrested for and things like that. Okay, we move on to the Marxists now. So Brake argues to some extent, now this is slightly different from what Young's saying. Brake argues it's a form of rebellion against capitalism. So young people often resort to crime as a form of rebellion against an oppressive capitalist system with class inequality. The reason this is more prominent amongst young people is because young people have less capitalist pressure compared to adults. They can therefore resist capitalism. When they get older, they are caught up in capitalist constraints, such as keeping a job or rent. So it might be, for example, not stealing from a shop as a form of resistance to capitalism, because when you're older, you might have a mortgage and you're worried about losing your job and having a criminal record. Whereas when you're younger, you haven't got those commitments. You might go and steal, you might go and vandalize, you might go and fight or do whatever it is as a form of resistance. Okay, now the next one you can use is Willis. Now, Willis technically is are Marxist slash interactionists. So you can use them for both here. And he kind of supports this a little bit with learning to labor. It's a famous study of, or it's a famous observation of schoolboys, working class schoolboys, where he found them to be to adopt anti-schooling subcultures that could be used to support the idea of rebellion against authority from a young age. So maybe Willis doesn't explicitly say it's because they have no commitments, but you could say that young working class people in the study were anti-establishment, because they thought the system they were in this case the education system, was pointless to them. So it highlights how working class people could be disillusioned with the idea of capitalism and meritocracy. So, for example, smoking at school because you do not care if you're excluded or arrested. Okay, then we come on to the interactionists. And Matza talks about this drift society amongst young people. So youths have a lack of responsibility and often see them drift into delinquency and criminality, often to fill time or to get a buzz out of the criminality. So in adulthood, people form responsibilities. That means they drift out of delinquency and criminality. So they maybe haven't got the time, or they can't afford to be caught, maybe stealing or taking drugs or whatever it may be. But Matt's is, again, very similar to what Brake was saying earlier. It's this idea that young people have less commitment, or more time, rather. Okay, another interactionist. So we've seen Stanley Cohen before. Moral panic. Youths are often labelled as criminal and delinquent by the media, leading to a moral panic. So this leads to police either who are targeting youths, or a self-fulfilling prophecy where youths live up to their subcultural label of criminality. So it might be secondary deviancy, self-fulfilling prophecy, where the youths go, well, everyone's telling me I'm criminal and delinquent, I might as well be that. Or it might be that the police have those labels about young people and go, yeah, we need to target them. So the example we've got here, youth subcultures, mods and rockers, were labelled in the media as thugs. Many lived up to this. Is how the young are labelled, essentially. And then finally, it's not directly linked to what we're talking about, but Heinsohn believes patriarchy often means that women are restricted in society, having an impact on their opportunity for crime. Men therefore commit more crime as they have more freedom and power to do so. This is especially true amongst young men. So this is technically control theory with things like bedroom culture or glass ceiling, but Heinsohn Heinsohn sort of is suggesting this is predominantly amongst young men. Young women don't have that access. It's young men who do. Right, so you've got your theories there. We've been through functionalist, Marxist, interactionalist, been through feminist. So now I'd like you to spend the last bit of the lesson answering this 12 marker. So discuss how far sociologists agree that capitalist rebellion can be used as an explanation for differences in crime between different ages. So that first paragraph is clearly Marxist. So you're going to start with Brake. You might offer a little bit of an alternative there by talking about Paul Willis in paragraph 1 to back it up. Make sure you got that critique in as well for the Marxists. And for paragraph 2, you can choose between the functionalists, the feminists, the interactionalists with labeling theory. And you might choose 2 of those. Make sure, obviously, you've got examples and you've got a critique in there as well. And then conclude.